5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we are live. Whenever you are, wherever you are, thanks for joining the Design of Everyday People podcast. Cue the intro. This is the Design of Everyday People.
It sound right, boy.
Yes, this is the Design of Everyday People podcast, where I talk to senior designers from all over the world and where you get to literally ask them anything. So stick around until the end where you get your questions answered. Again, I need to mute my LinkedIn. There we go. And I want to make this session as interactive as possible. So wherever you're tuning in from, just drop an emoji or the city name or the country name. Where are you listening to this live Ask Me Anything session from? And I'll try and bring you guys up on the screen if I see folks coming in. But again, this topic of today, or the name of the event, is how to sell the ROI of design. And let's start with quick introductions. I'm Chris, the founder of UX Playbook, but before that, a self-taught designer struggling to get into UX. But now I spend most of my time helping designers navigate a fuzzy career with UX Playbook. UX Playbook takes you from building your portfolio, your first portfolio, to leading your first design team. And if you want to tune in to more of these... Oh, sorry, just had someone come in, Chicago-based area, great. Good to have you, man. If you want to tune into more of these events, you can get notified here if you just scan that QR code, or I'll leave this in the top corner. So today I am joined by Ryan Scott, held roles at Airbnb, DoorDash, and Palantir. He got his MBA from one of the leading business schools in the world, UC Berkeley, and now spends his time teaching business skills to leading designers. So let's get Ryan out and find out more about him. Hey, Ryan, how's it going? How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. This is so fun.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Happy to have you on. For the folks that don't know you, do you want to give yourself a quick introduction?
Yeah, I mean, that was a great intro to start. So I'm Ryan. Hey, everyone. I have been a designer for almost 20 years. I have a very traditional background in some ways and an untraditional background in some ways. The traditional side is that I got my degree in graphic design, started doing website design, and then discovered this like product design thing, which like didn't even exist when I first got started. And I was like, the terminology keeps changing. What is this whole thing? And so I was in Seattle, went down to Silicon Valley, and started working at companies, at tech companies. I just knew I wanted to work on these really complex problems with engineers. I didn't even know what a PM was until someone gave me a PM job. It's like, sure, I'll do that. And so just kind of figured it out as I went and got to go work at all these cool companies. I was at DoorDash when it was 8 engineers. That's when I started. I reported to a co-founder. So I was super early days at DoorDash and watched that become a unicorn. The day DoorDash became a unicorn was also the day I was interviewing on site at Airbnb. And I went to Airbnb for 3.5 years. And I got this amazing era at Airbnb where we were pre-pandemic, pre-IPO, just building like crazy still. And so I got to redesign the booking flow, the messaging platform, the host calendar, the search results page, how you log in, log out, like huge surface areas of Airbnb, which was a ton of fun. So that's kind of the traditional side. The untraditional side is I've always kind of married design and business. When I was going into my undergraduate degree for graphic design, I had no idea how I was going to pay for school. So I just started doing freelance. And I actually remember this last night. I did my first design internship before I took my first design class in college. So I was like ahead of the curve a bit on this. And I used it to pay my way through school. And so for me, design has always been about design plus business. I was always running a freelance agency. I was always doing this type of work and selling and getting clients. And so I always loved that combination, and it always felt very natural to me. So a handful of years ago, I went and actually got that MBA from Berkeley to really understand, where did these problems come from? When a design project lands on my plate, why? Like, why is this a priority? How is this helping the big picture? How is it helping users, but also helping the business? And why do you need me to do it at all? That really opened my eyes to how businesses run and operate, what they care about. Of my cohort of 300 at Berkeley, two of us were designers. So I call this like the most expensive ethnographic study I've ever run. It was $150,000 in 3 years of my life to be surrounded by non-designers and just like immerse myself in topics like marketing and statistics and accounting and all these things, but also be around people who weren't designers, who thought differently, who solved problems differently, and start to understand them. So this moment in our industry and this moment in our economies, it's really becoming important that designers talk about our business value. And I've kind of found myself in this position where I, have this high craft background from places like Airbnb and also this MBA. And I'm like, great, like let's talk about this more. Let's see where designers are getting stuck and let's get them unstuck.
Yeah. And I'm gonna make you choose here. Sorry, Ryan. Graphic design classes or business classes? Which one was like? Which one did you like more? Because you've done
Oh,
both clearly. And are there a Is there a preference?
I feel like it's such different parts of your brain. I think when I was earlier in my career, like the craft side of things was so exciting to me, right? And I'm using the tools, I'm learning all these new things, and I can envision something and I know how to bring it to life. And there is something like, for lack of a better term, deeply romantic about being able to like envision something and create it from nothing and bring it to the world, and then millions of people are using it. There's something really like magical about that. So I loved that aspect of it. Uh, I love the business side of things because again, it comes back to like, but why am I doing this? Or why did that project get killed? Or why is this suddenly a huge priority? And then I hustle for a week and bust my ass for this PM. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, well, we change our priorities and we're not going to launch that anymore. It's like, where is this coming from? So later in my career, it became really relevant to understand the business side of things, just to contextualize the design work I was already doing. That was super important. So I will say that not every business topic was relevant. I think one of the things I hear in our industry is designers should learn business. It's like, what does that mean? Like, that's a huge statement, and it doesn't make sense in some situations, right? Like, I paid $6,500 to take an accounting class. Designers don't need to know accounting. I never teach accounting to anyone. It's not really necessary. But statistics, I mean, an A/B test is how all of your designs either live or die, right? So having some baseline and understanding statistics and testing methodology and data science and analysis, super useful. So it really depended on the course. And really, there were certain courses that really spoke to me as a designer of like, this is why this is happening to me. This is why things go down this way. Now that I have a better understanding of those things, I can start being a part of that process in a totally different way.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So before we get into our juicy topic about business and the ROI of design, I just want to remind the audience, as Ryan and I talk and have this conversation, drop your questions below. As soon as something comes up, so we can then address it at the end, because sometimes we might hold that question in our thought and then something else comes in and we'll forget it the next minute. So I wrote this in the event description, and I said most designers hate selling, or at least that's my experience. They hate selling their ideas, they hate selling their designs, they hate selling their impact. And hate maybe is a strong word, but let's just I'll stand by that for now. But why? Maybe it's because they fail to communicate with their stakeholders. Maybe it's because they're unable to quantify real world impact. Maybe they can't translate design to business value. And I think you're the perfect person to talk today about this. So we're going to dive into sort of how to sell designs, return on investment. And I want to start this conversation here where just so we kind of frame this conversation, why do we need to connect design to business? Like, what's the point? You alluded to it, or you said it earlier, but let's take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that was eye-opening to me going to Berkeley, which again is like top 20 business schools in the world, right? I was so excited to learn some things. And one thing that was really interesting to me that I learned was just how little business leaders of tomorrow are learning about design. So there was a design thinking course, and you had to take it. It was a requirement for everyone for the first year and a half. You just take all these requirements, right? Marketing, management, statistics, macroeconomics, microeconomics, accounting, finance, and design thinking. And I was like, good, like design has some kind of presence in this world-class program that's going to be producing the next generation of leaders. My year was the last year that was a requirement because so many people said this is fluffy, doesn't make sense. Why are we doing this? I shouldn't be a requirement, that they actually made it an elective. So I thought Berkeley was like ahead of the curve. We regressed a little bit. I know some other universities don't touch on this topic at all. So as a designer, going back to those graphic design classes, I wasn't learning anything about business at all. Like I'm producing materials for businesses, but I'm not thinking about the business impact. I'm producing logos or I'm producing a website, but I'm not tracking metrics and I'm not being told about what the strategy is for the business. I'm focused on the craft of it. I'm focused on the production of it. And then the business folks are doing the same thing, right? They're not learning about us and we're not learning about them. And so there is this inherent disconnect that's happening. It's not going away anytime soon. So that's one reason, is that there isn't this just like intrinsic understanding of what designers do, the value that designers bring to the table. So that is already a challenge. Our positioning sometimes within organizations also is pretty tricky. Oftentimes, like product designers report up to product management, and product management is seen as the people who like come up with the plans and the solutions. And engineers are really valuable because they actually execute. Like you don't need a designer or a PM, you just need an engineer and they can build something 0 to 1 on their own. So the value of PM as the planner is clear, and the value of the engineer as someone who actually makes the thing happen is clear. Designers are kind of this, well, they're the people that make things better than they would have been otherwise. So there's also this kind of misconception. And then the last thing I'll add is that the last few years, we've had these major macroeconomic shifts, right? Where we had with, the pandemic was like throwing a rock into a pond and it just like screwed up everything. And we're still seeing not the health implications of it, but the economic implications of it. That designers like need to be able to talk about our business value because businesses are tightening their belts, right? They're like not sure what is going to happen, at least in America, with like tariffs, the economy, stock market's kind of like no one's really sure what's going to happen. And so businesses become really defensive and they become conscious of, well, how much are we spending? Are we spending too much? Do we know where that spend is going? Do we know what value we're getting for that spend? And anytime there's ambiguity, that introduces the concept of risk, and they're going to try to de-risk those things. And sometimes that means like lay off a bunch of designers who we don't really know what they did anyway. And so this kind of this perfect storm of we've benefited, I think, as an industry as a whole from like really great economic times for 10 or 12 years where we didn't really have to defend ourselves. We don't have to articulate ourselves. There was a lot more money flowing around a lot more smoothly. And people were like, I want to, spin up a design team. I want an innovation team, was something you saw 8 years ago. You don't see anymore. And people were like, yeah, sure. Cool. Sounds sexy. Great. Now that's not the case. All of those things that we're like, yeah, awesome. Perfect. There's a party going. Let's just add more people. That's all gone. And so, yeah, we are in the situation where the trajectory is still not looking great in terms of business people aren't being trained to understand design. And now the bar is a lot higher for us to articulate our values. So we won't get laid off. So we will get hired. So we'll get pulled into better, more impactful projects or pulled in more strategically into those projects.
Yeah. So I know you teach a course on strategic job search and tactics. Do you think it's key in that process to sort of communicate your value as a designer through the lens of the business, like how you impacted, certain solutions and what result? Do you think that adds to the repertoire and can only be beneficial, or do you suggest everyone do it when they're kind of looking for a job?
Well, yeah, there's a couple different situations, right? If you're looking for a job, being able to speak to the business impact of the work you did in some way is becoming more and more critical. That's actually, I teach 3 courses on Maven now. The 3rd course I just launched a couple weeks ago is a job search course. And that's one thing I train people to do is like, what was the business value? You got to put that in your portfolio. You got to put it on your website. It needs to be everywhere. You don't need perfect metrics. Designers get hung up on the idea of like, well, I don't have that perfect conversion number. Okay, well, let's talk about some other type of business impact then. We can expand out from that or make it more abstract, but you have to speak to it to some degree. So if you're looking for a job, that is a huge differentiator because most designers are not trained to do that or don't think to do that. or don't know how. If you're in a company and you want to be leveraged more strategically, you need to demonstrate that you understand how that company works, that you have some ideas. Someone in the chat asked about like a real world example. Um, I'm happy to share like tons of stories. There were many times at DoorDash, because those are so early, that I wanted to get something on the roadmap. There were no PMs. We were just deciding what to do. And so my ability to like look at some data, do some competitive analysis, I can make a pitch for, I was the person who proposed live order tracking at DoorDash. That's what you could see your order on its way, right? The very first MVP version of it was not the best, but it helped people understand, and they were getting hangry in their contacting support. Or thinking about, can we get order or supplies out to drivers faster? They were all required to come on site to get their supplies and do training. I was like, is that really necessary? Let's dig into some data and see. So the ability to like think in terms of what the business outcomes are and say, hey, look, this is good for the user for these reasons. This is good for the business for these reasons. There's this amazing synergy between those two things. It's going to help you get your ideas across. So if you're in-house and you want to start being leveraged differently, you want a bigger seat at the table, getting that awareness and that understanding is a huge credibility builder that's going to over time unlock those things that you want. But it does take diligence, and it does take training, and it does take the work to achieve those outcomes.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect segue to say, okay, let's just say we're sort of chucking the job search example out the door, and we say, okay, I'm a designer now, and I'm in my org, I'm a senior designer, but I want to sort of gain more influence. I want to see at the table, right? So to speak. Any things that you can sort of help us? How would they sort of set themselves up for success here?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, there's two things you can do. And if you think about ROI as a concept. So firstly, I never recommend that people like calculate the ROI of design. You can calculate the ROI of a design. Like the team collectively spent 2 weeks doing this. It had conversion lift of this, which produced X dollars. It was worth it or not worth it. That's fine. When you get into like, what is the value of having a design team? Or Ryan was in the room for 47 minutes. Like, how much business value did that create? It becomes incalculable. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. Articulate your value in different ways. The concept of ROI is really valuable. This cost benefit ratio of like, well, if we invest some time or resources into this, like, what are we going to get out of it? What I love about that is you can do two things to increase the ROI of something. It's important to understand. You can try to increase the return or the benefit, or you can try to reduce the cost. And so I think that actually gives us an interesting strategy as designers. Is what we've just been talking about is, how do we increase the benefit, the top line, the numerator of, I'm going to talk to the business more, I'm going to understand those people, develop those relationships. Also, you can just reduce the cost. And in this case, designers shoot themselves in the foot a lot. So the first thing I recommend to people is like, how do we shoot ourselves in the foot less often? How do we not make a lot of common mistakes to get ourselves to a neutral place to then build upon that? A couple things are just about like communication style and attitude. So firstly, I do want to level set with, if you're a crafty designer and you want to be a crafty designer, you're like, I don't want to get into politics. I don't want to influence the roadmap. Can I just like ship beautiful things? Like, that's totally fine, right? If you want to just keep your head down and do those things, awesome. Like, that is a completely legitimate approach. I'm really speaking to the designers who are like, but I want more. I want to influence what I'm working on and not just have things handed to me. That's where you need to kind of step up in a couple ways. So the few things I see, and I've been so guilty of this, there's a couple things I see happen that designers do that undermine our own goals, is the way I'll say it. Firstly, like, there's this kind of designer identity of like, we're creatives, we're special, we're different. And what happens is we other ourselves. So you're like, I'm not a business person, I'm a creative. It's like, okay, well, everyone else in the business is a business person though. So you've got like the marketing people and the sales people and the HR people and the C-suite. And you just said, I'm not like any of you, I'm like this. It's like, all right, well, firstly, then you're kind of, one, potentially alienating those people. And two, design is always going to be a minority in a large organization. And it's not going to really help you win any alliances to be like, we're this other special group and we don't believe in profits, and I'm here for the craft and the art and the beauty of it all, but I don't need to know, I don't have to be accountable to the same standards that every other function and every other person is held to. So firstly, we have to kind of get that attitude out of our system a little bit. The other thing I see is this idea of, well, I'll understand the business people when they understand design, and I'll make some effort when they make some effort. And I've never found that approach to work. You just kind of get stuck in this chicken and egg situation where no one makes the first move, and then you're kind of just unhappy about your career trajectory or unhappy about how you're working in an organization. How are you ever going to break out of that? And so when you get stuck in these cycles, my personal philosophy has been that I can only control me. I can't control other people. And so I will look for the things that I can do first to push that snowball down the hill, to start that process. A great thing you can do is just start being curious. Like, designers are curious people, we're empathetic people, we're researchers, we're brainstormers, right? Take all of those skills and apply them internally to your organization. Be curious, go meet with people, go talk to them, understand their goals, understand their incentives. What are they trying to do this quarter and why? They're trying to hit a goal. Like, maybe you're PM and you have a difficult relationship and they're pushing for like A/B test after A/B test after A/B test. And you're like, what is going on? This doesn't feel strategic. We're not thinking long-term. We're creating a bunch of design debt in the process. Maybe that person is going to lose their job and they need to hit some metrics because they don't want to get fired. And they're just behaving that way because they don't know what else to do. If you understand that, you can talk to them about what are those metrics, help me understand your world. You're going to gain a huge amount of credibility because you actually took the time to get to know them. And then they're going to listen to you. It's like, well, I already told Ryan a lot about how this system works. So I know when he has an opinion, he knows what he's talking about. He's well informed. That's a great place to start, is to develop those relationships and go with that humility and go with that empathy. Ask and learn, do your research. And then the way that transforms relationships can be pretty phenomenal. So those are the things I definitely advise starting with, is like, don't think of yourself as different or special. Like, try to embrace that design really is about, yes, this like artsy kind of craft side of things. It's about users, but it's also about the business, and it's about the balance between those two things. And honestly, it's not as mutually exclusive as people think or try to make it out to be on LinkedIn or wherever, right? So if we can embrace that this is a balance between two things, it's a yin and a yang a little bit, that is going to set you off on the right trajectory.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I think, not to overuse the word empathy, but that we have to understand the humans that we work with, and figure out how can we play as, a team versus just one side versus the other. um you like we had some notes here before, but you mentioned something around how designers should embrace selling, and I think that matches what I said and how I introduced the conversation, which is like, we don't like it, it feels icky and it's just not natural. So in what sense do you mean when you say embrace selling? What should they be doing? I mean, you had some examples there, but could you dive into that a little bit more for me?
Yeah. Yeah, I think anytime you want someone to do something differently, or you want someone to do something that you want them to do, it's a sales process, right? So again, if you just want to keep your heads down, they're handing you projects, you want to just push the pixels, and people are like, great, I love those pixels. Thank you very much. And you're like, great, this works. Totally fine. If you want to interrupt that process in any way, you're going to have to pitch it to someone to say, look, this is what I think we should do. This is why. So I think largely like life is sales. I have a 2.5-year-old and a almost 5-year-old, and I'm like constantly selling. I'm like, put your pants on. Why? Because you have to wear pants to go to school. Otherwise you get in trouble. Like life is this like negotiation between human beings. That just is the way it is. And so I think people sometimes feel like sales is this dirty thing where you're trying to get people to do something that's not in their own best interest. And so let's make a distinction between like sales as like this kind of like sleazy used car salesman being like, I'm going to try to sell you this thing that's really not going to work for you. And let's say we're not going to do that, but there is a form of like selling that is actually, this is really going to help you for these reasons. And this is what we do all the time with users, right? We listen to their needs. We do our research. We understand what they're asking for. Sometimes they ask for something. We're like, well, I'm not just going to ship exactly what you asked for, but I'm going to try to understand your underlying need here, and then say, look, I'm going to build this feature for you. Or I'm going to launch, this language for you, or change something, right? here's why this helps you, and understanding kind of the value props of like, what does this do for that person, and talking to them about it, not in an aggressive way, but just saying like, here's what I think this is, how this might help you. Now that I understand you and we've had that conversation or many conversations, develop that relationship, aligning to their interests, aligning to their incentives, be like, you want to hit your metrics. That makes total sense. I know you're super conscious of shipping this really quickly. If I can get an extra day of time to do research, it's going to de-risk this project a lot and make it far more likely that we're going to hit those metrics and be well rewarded at the end of the quarter, right? So that's kind of a sales pitch, right? And that's okay to say that thing. It's not wrong to do that. And if you want people to ship the things you want them to ship, you want to shape the product in a certain way, you want to get something on the roadmap, you want to, like, I've worked with a bunch of executives, if you want to show them what you think is the right approach, then that's that process. And I think it's okay to embrace the idea that we're going to do research, we're going to understand their interests, we're going to align to those things. They'll make a decision one way or the other. We want to try to influence that decision. We don't have total control, but that's an okay process to go through. And that's something we should feel comfortable with doing externally and internally.
Right. And I think, do you think there's any value to, when you want to sell something, show them the potential through data or metrics, or do you think you don't need something like that, or you could do it through figuring out what their incentive is?
I mean, incentives go huge, right? If someone's pushing back against you and you don't know why, and you like this happens a lot. This kind of straw man argument where it's like, well, I don't like it because of this. Okay, well, we can neutralize that. We can descope this. It's too expensive. Okay, well, we descope it. Well, I don't know if the timing's right. Okay, well, let's move the timing. Well, it's like always some other, growing. There's always some pushback. What it is you're arguing against their, in a negotiation, is called positions versus interests, right? You're arguing against their positions, and the position is what you say in a negotiation. And an interest is the underlying reason you're saying all those things. So you can go play whack-a-mole with all those different ideas, and you're never going to get anywhere because they're always going to find some other thing. You're not understanding what's really going on under the surface. And so I do think that that's the first place to start, is let's understand what's going on the surface. That doesn't mean we don't have to then come with evidence, right? So if we understand that PM wants to hit their metrics, they're going to get fired, or they're afraid of that, they're a brand new PM, no one's helping them, they're underwater, they're freaking out. That's where the empathy comes in. You're like, oh, okay, you're new, you're freaking out, you're underwater, let me help you. There's still a million ways. This is why we do design thinking and brainstorming, right? You can put a bunch of Post-it notes up on the wall and say, all right, there's a million ways we can help this person. There's a million products we can ship. There's a million ways we can shape this feature. You still then need evidence to choose which direction to go. And I like to frame it that way specifically. It's not always just about data. Data is a good entry point. And I think what happens is designers get stuck when we think about data, and how product teams think about data. They think about it this way, and then they pigeonhole us, and then we have to think about it this way, and we get stuck. We need to get unstuck. So again, negotiation tactic. If someone puts you into a specific frame, can you reframe the conversation to get out of that hole, like kind of hole you've been dug and put into? And so if someone's like, well, we have to have an A/B test, we have to get data. That's one form of data, right? You can also look at past A/B tests to say, like, we've done similar tests 3 times before. You can look at, other types of historical or performance data. You're like, look, this conversion rate is dropping over time. A good example of that is when I did the live order tracking project for DoorDash, I looked at the funnel on the website because I just had access to it. And it was like, a classic funnel, right? You've got a lot of people on the homepage, and then it drops and it drops and it drops until they get to checkout. And then the page where people watch their orders had 3 times as many views as the homepage, because people were there hangry, refresh, 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 refresh. Where's my food? Where's my food? Where's my food? And so it's like, okay, like, I didn't run an A/B test, but I got some kind of data to say there might be something to explore here. And if people are that hangry, refreshing obsessively, 3 times more page hits than there are on the homepage of the site, those people are probably contacting support. They're probably calling their driver and distracting them, and while they're in traffic, being like, where the heck are you? None of those things are good, right? And so that was a good, point of evidence. Another great point of evidence would be like competitive analysis. At DoorDash specifically, we weren't paying drivers very flexibly. We'd pay out drivers every week. So if you dashed on Tuesday, you wouldn't get paid until next Monday. So there's no like immediate gratification there. And you've got Uber then, who's launching Uber Eats, who pays out drivers up to 5 times a day on demand. So we were falling way behind. So I looked at some competitive analysis and said, we're the least flexible payment. If we want to like get people on the road because we have a supply shortage, we want them to dash right now, get off your couch, put on your pants, and go do deliveries for us. Like we can't say then, and we'll pay you next week. It's like, no. There's like a disconnect between how urgently we need you and then how long we expect you to wait to be paid. So, those types of evidence, competitive analysis, performance data, not just A/B testing data, industry benchmarks, any of those types of things are things you can bring to the table to be more compelling and convincing.
Yeah, I really like your example of live order tracking. So, quick example, I found myself ordering Domino's last week and I was literally on their homepage and I was like, what's going on? Where's the status? I'm not getting notified. There's no progress bar, there's no stage. And I was like, oh my God, what's it? No emails. And I was just like very anxious as a customer that just gave you a bunch of money and basically
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening. And I really felt it. And I was like waiting downstairs, like, is my pizza coming? Should I order another pizza? It's just
and
terrible.
and food, and we won't have to go on this long tangent on this, but it's like, firstly, it's like e-commerce like convention. If I order something off Amazon, I expect to get updates, right? And so by not meeting those expectations, you're going to irritate people already. And then food specifically is like my blood sugar's dropping. I'm having physiological reactions in my body that is changing my emotional state and my feelings towards your brand, right? Where I'm like getting that like fight or flight. I'm hungry. I'm starving. For me, I've got kids and I'm like, they're starting to hit each other because they're so hungry. Like, I need to know what's going on, bro. So yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's realizing what's happening for the user, hugely important, right? This is the reason. They're not bad for contacting support. They're just hungry and we need to get them their food and we need to set expectations. It's an e-commerce industry, best practice, and it's going to save us a ton of money. I don't think we ever ran the calculation on this, and this is an important point I'll make. I don't think we ever ran the numbers on this, because when you're at a fast moving startup, you're like, that makes sense. Let's build that. And then we did. And then you keep building upon it. And probably they ran the numbers on it eventually. But we didn't, like, as far as I know, project how much money it would save us, debate that, go back and say, how much money did it save us? We built it and we moved on to the next thing. And that's the thing, is when it comes to evidence and ROI, some of these things, the way that business decisions are made are through enough evidence that you can reach a certain degree of consensus, right? And so it's not about having the perfect numbers. Some companies are like, no, we have to have perfect data. Cool. Like Uber's like super data obsessed. Got it. That's their culture. Some cultures are not that way. Some companies don't have perfect data. If you're like a 4-person startup, you just have tea leaves that you're trying to read all the time. You don't have statistically significant data. You don't have millions of users, but you still have to make decisions every day based on the best available information. And I'm a solopreneur right now. That's the best I can do some days, is like, give it a shot, see how it goes, see how it feels next month, and then make an adjustment one way or the other. I try to use data as much as possible, but it's all imperfect. And I'm trying to look as many different diversified signals to get a sense of what the right thing to do is. But if we all had perfect data all the time, no businesses would make any mistakes ever. And that just isn't the case. So I always try to emphasize, look for enough evidence to try to reach some degree of consensus and get some initial allies into whatever your ideas are, and then try to build momentum from there.
Yeah, I think the getting allies is super interesting, and I think is really effective as well. Like, if someone is, your craft inclined or believes in what you're doing, it's way easier to sort of get them into the room and to add to the conversation, where you don't feel like you're that solo person fighting for this feature or fighting for this item on the roadmap, but there's other people that you've spoken to before to prepare for this huge meeting that you're about to have with the CEO or
Yeah.
co-founder in the room. And that definitely has helped me, which is like, yes, let's prepare for this meeting as a micro team into the larger team, right? And then we can kind of strategize and see what are the trade-offs that we should make.
Absolutely. And I've done this, and I've seen this done very well. you can start with just a few people, right? You just need to like begin. And what I think designers miss is we talk about high fidelity, low fidelity, and what we miss is no fidelity, right? PMs are really good at this. They're like, I have an idea. What do you think? I got a little bit of evidence. I got a little bit of data. What do you think? And that is often enough to identify the people. There will be some percentage of people in the room, a minority, but a few that are like, that's really interesting. Let's keep asking questions in that direction. Let's dig into that a little bit further. It's not everyone right away, but it's a few people who are like, this is really something we should investigate. My favorite case study of this is actually my manager at Airbnb. One of the coolest projects I got to work on. I'll just say the coolest project I've ever got to work on was to redesign and rebuild all of Airbnb from the ground up in a year. So it started off as my manager looking at our mobile website being like, this platform is garbage. Like compared to, he gathered evidence. He did a great job of this. He looked at how our competitors, like they loaded much faster. He looked at our other platforms. Like we had been investing in iOS for a really long time and kind of neglected the mobile website as its own unique platform. We had said, oh, if we build a responsive desktop site, then we get the mobile site for free, right? And the problem was that wasn't the case. Like we just had neglected it. And because it didn't perform very well, we're like, well, it's, we made up some narrative. Like, well, that's because people aren't that committed. If they're really like motivated, they'll download the app. Just kind of made up some stupid rationale. And then so people didn't invest, so it didn't perform, so it didn't invest, so it didn't perform. And it just like kind of spiraled. And so my manager went and said, like, firstly, everyone else is better than us. Our other platforms are better than this platform. There's a huge amount of traffic though to it. There's a lot of demand for this. It's like probably the lowest buried entry is if you don't want to go download a 300 megabyte app, you just want to check it out and see what it's like. You probably go to the site. You might do it on your phone. And then what we did was we went to on 3 back-to-back months. This was so fun. We went to China, Mexico, and Brazil and did research on how people travel. And so it's like I was like on a flight every month going to a different continent. And there are people like, especially in Brazil, they travel like once every couple of years. They travel mostly domestically. They don't want Airbnb app on their phone all the time because they're going to use it in 2 years. And they're like, I would have to delete pictures of my kids to put your app on my phone. So there was like a real need to have this be its own platform. And he gathered this evidence and got a PM interested, got an engineering manager interested, and kind of got them, assembled a little bit, got a little bit of groundswell, took this to Brian Chesky and said, look, like this should be something we fund because of all these reasons. Like we look worse than competitors. It's underperforming. The conversion rate sucks, even compared to our own platforms. Just look at the experience. It's terrible. And we have talked to people and we have looked at the data. Like we know this is something we should invest in. And so Brian said, cool, build a tiger team. I was one of 4 designers on this team, and there were 8 engineers and 1 PM, and we got to own the entire mobile website platform end to end and work with all these different teams, blow the whole thing up and start over. What was cool then is because no one else was in the position to do this in the whole company. Effectively, we redesigned all of Airbnb and rebuilt it. And then we had the most like modern, sexy version of Airbnb. And then every other platform followed what we had built. And we worked with all the teams to create parity then. So it's kind of how like 4 of us redesigned all of Airbnb. It sounds like a boot camp exercise, right? But it started with gathering some evidence, getting a few people, taking it to a few stakeholders, be like, look what we're seeing. This is really interesting. There's something here that's really going to be better for our users and really going to be better for our business. And the business implications of that, especially before the IPO, were really huge. So that's a good example of kind of building that groundswell and starting small, starting with no mocks, starting with an idea, starting with some evidence and data, and then getting people interested. And ultimately we had like every team was involved with us because we were touching everything. And so everyone got involved, but it started very organically and started very small.
Dude, that's such a cool story. And particularly I like get a tiger team together and go work on it, because it's like, hey, I don't need to use a lot of resources to get this moving. And eventually, of course, you said it rolled out to everybody and everybody was touching part of it, right? But he also approached it in a way that's like, okay, it's important enough, but it's not the most important thing that the company needs to kind of like drop everything and do. And that's really, really cool. Yeah, amazing.
A big part of that project for me was redesigning the whole booking flow. And it was like a 5-page flow that we had built like 4 or 5 different teams own pieces of it, right? The payments team, the trust and safety team, there was a booking team, the growth team had components, and everyone had just like assembled this awful Frankenstein, and no one was really managing it end to end. And this project started as part of that mobile website project. Was Ryan, we want you to redesign the booking piece. We've redesigned search, we've redesigned the homepage, we've redesigned the account page, we've redesigned all these things. Now the booking section's next. You're on this, go look and figure it out and see what you want to do. And so that started with me just going to those teams, asking a lot of questions, learning, and realizing, okay, I'm in this position to say, look, this is actually, when we look at it end to end, we look at it holistically and we zoom out, this is way worse of an experience than anyone realized because they were all so focused on their little pieces of it. And so that again started with me saying, like, look at some things I found, look at my discovery. I did an audit, look at these things, and made people aware. And then they were like, oh shit, we should do something. And then I started saying, here's some principles I think we should embrace. Here's some, very, very low fidelity ideas just to get people on board with what this could be. And it went through multiple permutations. And where we landed was, I really pushed hard for this, was we went from like a 5-step process to a single tap. Right. We just said, like, there's content that doesn't need to be here. Some of this is redundant. It just doesn't belong. I had to negotiate with a ton of different teams. I'd be like, I know that button means a lot to you, but we don't need it to be here. It should be somewhere else. And it took a long time. It's another good example of like starting small and saying, what do you guys think about these ideas? What do you think about this? What do you think about these principles? What do you think about these really low fidelity concepts? And trying to engage people very actively, make them active participants in the process, show them what you're thinking, and just go with it. Like, I'm seeing this. Are you guys seeing the same thing? I think there's something here. What do you all think? And people are like, yeah, there is. Cool. Like, now I've got some of that buy-in. I've got some of that momentum, and I can take those people and they will have their own ideas. They will have concerns. They will have pushback. Great. I'm going to take those ideas. We're going to bake them into the process. We're going to take that pushback. We're going to neutralize it. We're going to figure out how to reshape something or move something or, descope something to reduce their concerns. And then you take it to a larger group and you do the same process again. And every time you take it to a bigger group, they've got new ideas and new concerns, and you bake in the good ideas and you neutralize the concerns. And then by the time we actually got it up in front of Brian, it had been really well assembled. We still had a lot of questions. We still hadn't finished everything, but there was a lot of really smart thinking that had gone into it from a lot of different people, like a huge cross-functional team of people, that, getting him to greenlight that went really smoothly because we had done our due diligence and a lot of people were excited and participated.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that's a good segue to our audience questions. So let's throw this one up. Oh, where did it disappear to? Sometimes ROI can't be realized due to interdepartmental bottlenecks. What do you do when it's outside of your control, not implemented after months of work? So I guess it's kind of, I'll just let you take this one. Sure.
I mean, this is tricky. And if you want to add more context is always helpful. If you don't launch something, you don't launch something. And usually that ROI is still the thing that's going to help determine whether something launches. And people will say there's three levers. How much value do we think this is going to produce? How much do we think this is going to cost? And how much risk is there? And if we don't have the right team in place, team morale is bad, like, it's highly risky. We're not going to actually swing in and hit a home run here. If it's just going to require too much lift, it's not really worth it. Or if we don't understand the value, then it's not likely to win out. So usually I try to say, like, it's usually outside of your control. And what you're probably getting at is, even in a portfolio, how do I articulate, like, I did all this work and then it didn't ship? That's a tricky situation. Sometimes what I would do is have some hypotheses on what metrics would have moved, right? Like, this is the human behavior we're changing. We were going to measure these types of things. It's just the reality that sometimes a fire pops up in another part of the business and you have to pivot. And that actually can be a good thing to demonstrate in an interview of, like, this didn't ship for these reasons because something else cropped up over here and we had to pivot, and that's okay. So I think that you can try to realize if something does ship. So there's the doesn't ship and you're trying to still express it in your portfolio. There's the it does ship, but I don't have the perfect data. It's like, let's think about what other things, if we're trying to if I wish I could tell the story about conversion, we just didn't measure that. What are metrics that moved as a result of this project that I can talk about that were still good for the business? It's not always just the thing you're gold on. It's also a lot of other things move typically when you launch anything. And then there are also benefits to the business when you launch something or do work, especially for designers, that are not just about product metrics, right? If we organized a brainstorming session and we got the engineers and the researchers and PMs in the room for the first time ever, and now they all know each other and they know how to work together and they're more effective on the next project, that's still really beneficial to the business that we've developed those relationships. We have that trust. We're going to ship better work faster next time as a result of the work we did on this project. Even though that project didn't ship, we still did it together and we still gained some benefit from it. So that's a couple ways I would approach that. And feel free to email me or like message me on, everyone should connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to message me on LinkedIn if you want to go deeper into any of these questions.
Nice. So we have someone from your course about a month
Ooh,
ago.
anonymous student. Yeah, anonymous
I know,
alumni. I love it.
right? Yeah, exactly. Mysterious. My question is, how would you articulate the value of teams that are deemed enablement teams and enable others to do things better? So maybe design ops could be classed as an enablement team. Yeah, what is your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is where you have to get away from, again, like, I'd love to know what enablement team means, like, more specifically, because every enablement team, like, we all should support each other. Firstly, every team should be enabled. Like product should be supporting engineering and design in helping them make sure they have no roadblocks and they can ship really efficiently. Design should be supporting product in the metrics they hit. Engineering should be like working with everyone together to build the right, whatever. So we should all just be in a culture of helping each other. And we should, I don't know, the concept of enablement team to me is very strange. But if you're like a researcher or a ops person and you're seen as like, it has to do with power dynamics in an organization and an org chart, and like you're the person that's the support person, then piggyback off of the wins of other teams, right? A lot of times those teams are, the enablement teams are about changing culture, operational efficiency, improving the quality of something, right? Like a design systems team might be an enablement team because they're helping designers and engineers work better and faster. Are they connected to the actual product that ships and the conversion number goes up necessarily? Maybe not. Are we making our teams ship work that has less bugs that we have to go back and spend money fixing? We're reducing costs, not just gaining value. So a lot of people are like, well, how do I connect to revenue and or really profit is what you want to connect to? And the two ways to connect to profit, it's increased revenue. And they're like, well, it didn't move conversion. Okay, cool. Let's not tell that story. Let's talk about how we reduce costs. That's the other way to improve profit. So if I'm helping as the design systems team or design ops team, helping teams work better together, have more trust, work faster, produce quality work, outpace the competition, like that shipping velocity, meet our customer needs in a more significant way, meet our customer needs more than the competitors are, finding new opportunities that other people are missing. Any of those types of things are things that are net good for the business as a whole. You can't always attach all types of business value to like a product metric. And that's one thing I teach in my design, describing the ROI design course. It's like, yes, some value can be captured through product metrics, but even product is a piece of the business as a whole. Like the HR team or the legal team don't exist to hit product metrics. They exist to help the business in other ways. And actually a lot of what designers do helps the business in some of those other ways. So sometimes you have to disconnect from product metrics if it's not the right story and the company's not going to buy that. They're like, I don't know. It's like, okay, cool. We'll find a different way. Do you care about how quickly we ship? Do you care about how many bugs, how much time we waste in Jira tickets because we shipped something that was crappy and had to go back or pissed off a lot of users? NPS is really low because a new feature we were marketing was full of bugs and didn't meet expectations. We're the people that help prevent those negative outcomes. We're the people that help make things faster and better. Sometimes that's a way to tell the story.
Yeah. Okay, so that was amazing because there's so many examples for this this anonymous student of yours to pull from and work with. So that's great. Okay, let's go to the next one. What's the biggest mistakes designers make when trying to prove their value to a company?
Yeah, such a good question. So many. The word prove is interesting to me. It has a lot of implications. Let's go to statistics really quickly. In statistics, there's like two ways to analyze data that I talk about. You learn about A/B testing, right? And A/B testing is about you eliminate every variable that you can, except for the two. Like, you've got the control and the treatment. That's the A and the B, right? You eliminate everything else, and you change something, and as long as it's statistically significant, you can essentially prove a causal relationship between we did this and then we did this, and something moved. It's a result of the action we took, right? That's proof. Outside of that process, you don't prove anything. Everything is about correlation. What you would do in statistics is a regression analysis. You say, we've got all these variables. When I change one variable, how much do all the other things change? And you can kind of pick and look at different things. And in all science, you see this, right? Of like, okay, what is the average life expectancy? Okay, well, let's examine smoking. How correlated is smoking with a a shorter life? It's very correlated. Does that mean it's causal? Like, we can start to look at proving that. But you start with like, yeah, that's really significantly related to those two things. And you probably shouldn't smoke, by the way. So almost all business decisions are based on that, right? Which is, again, best guess of some of those types of things, right? So we're not trying to prove, we're trying to demonstrate. And that's why the course I teach is describing the ROI of design, not calculate or prove. It's about let's tell our story in a way that resonates. And that's all very specific to the company stage, the company culture, what are compelling arguments to the CEO, what are compelling arguments to the PMs. And so the biggest mistakes I see are one, like playing into the proof game. Like let's reframe, again, negotiation tactic, reframe outside of that, be like, when designers in the room, it helps in all these different ways. We can pull designers out of the room, and some of those projects will succeed anyway. We don't want to get pulled into that. So trying to like play that data game, have perfect data to prove something is already going to start you off on a not great foot. And so the biggest thing you can do is look at more holistically the business impact. And I think the other thing is like, again, you can try to prove the impact of a design, but not like, well, what was the value of Ryan in the room for 47 minutes? We can't run a parallel universe where Ryan wasn't in the room for 47 minutes and compare and contrast. Like, you can't prove a counterfactual. This would have happened for sure had we done things differently. You can't prove that. So it all just gets really tricky. And if you the biggest mistake is playing into that rationale or trying to answer that question too directly. You're not going to win credibility because you're never going to have perfect data, and the people are going to be like, well, that data's imperfect, and then you're kind of screwed. So try to back out away from that is what I would say.
Yep. Got it. Okay, this one might tickle you. What metrics best capture design impact or business impact of design beyond aesthetics?
So this is really interesting. It became kind of a joke in business school, especially the first year, as we were all like, had no idea what we gotten ourselves into. We're all coming from totally different jobs, sizes, businesses, whatever, industries. And the correct answer to almost every question in business school was, it depends. And it just became this like long-standing joke between class to class to classes, it depends. So the best metrics to capture, I would say there isn't a metric, I would say. And I try to advise designers on not like people are like, we've invented these UX metrics. It's like, now you're trying to sell, you're trying to teach people about UX metrics and sell that to them as almost like a product. They have to like understand it, embrace it, and buy into it. What I try to do is like, no, I'm not going to invent some new thing. I'm going to try to understand what you care about and then align all my work to that. And so that is company to company specific. That is quarter to quarter specific in terms of OKRs. That is project to project or product to product or team to team specific, right? So if your PM is like, one of the big projects I launched was at DoorDash. I'm the one that brought photography to DoorDash. So they basically said, Ryan, here's $250,000, go get us photos. Not design photos in the app, go source the photography, create the style guide, hire photographers, train them, get them to the merchants, take the photos and get the photos in the right place in the product. That was my job. And so I did have a PM that was super laser focused on conversion, of course. And we ran an A/B test where it didn't move conversion. The first version of this didn't move conversion. They were like, let's kill this thing. That was the most important metric to him. The way I kept the project going was that I had developed those alliances with like the marketing team, who's like, it's awesome to have 40,000 photos. Great, we get to use these for so many things. The business development team was like, we're trying to sign McDonald's and Uber Eats has photos and we don't. And if we have photos, McDonald's is more likely to partner with us. The merchant teams are like, this is a carrot to get people to become partners who we get a higher cut of their sales through. So all of these different teams had different things they cared about. And so I don't think there's a best metric or any one number. It's about, what do people care about? What are they aligning to? And how can I tell my story of like, look, if we make people more confident in what they're about to buy, that's going to have a lot of different implications. That's going to probably change conversion if we nail in the execution just right. That's going to help the business in a bunch of other ways too. So, I would say there's not any one best. It's what metric is going to be the most compelling. Again, it's about selling, it's about developing consensus with people. It's about aligning to their interests and incentives. What do you care about? Why do you care about it? What do all these teams care about? What's good for the business? And then how can I tell the story of my work through all of those different lenses? And so the best for that PM was conversion. Cool. The best for the marketing team was different. The best for the sales team was different, all from the same project. And the project moved the needle across all those different teams. And only by talking to those teams and developing those relationships, I would say, like, this is, again, that low fidelity. I would go and say, we're working on photos. Here's some examples. And people were like, they came out of the woodwork and they're like, this is amazing. We can use these photos in all these different ways. And I was like, I didn't think about that. That's awesome. So the more you share your work, the more people will tell you why they think it's going to help them. And then that's where you start pulling on that thread. And it's going to be, if you think about users and personas, this is a way designers should think about this. You're going to develop a product differently for different people. They need different things, even from the same product or the same feature. Different personas need different things. It's the same thing with creating anything internally. Different teams are going to need different things. Let's go identify those needs. Let's develop that little persona for the marketing team, the product team, the sales team, or whoever. And then we're going to tell those people when we are pitching them, this is why it's going to help you. And so that's why there's no best. It's whatever is going to get them excited and move the needle for them and in a way that's meaningful to them.
Perfect.
That's my perspective on that. That's a non-answer. It's a very long non-answer. I wish I could be like, conversion is always the right thing to do. But it's like, you work in B2B. I'm training people who work in government. Like, it's totally, there is no conversion metric in government when you're designing city streets. It's something else. So it's very specific into what goal you have for any individual project or organization.
Yeah, exactly. Ryan, I'm cognizant of time, so I think that's a great place to end this. And the anonymous cohort participant says thank you. So,
I love you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. I appreciate the anonymous support. I love it. Thank you. And before we let you go, Ryan, I just want to thank you as well. This has been really, really good. I think you shared a lot of examples that you went through and tips and tactics to kind of how to not just to talk about the work you do, but also how to think and reframe the situation you're in. So that I think that is a great start to the first stage of pitching, negotiating, selling the thing, is to reframe how you approach or even think about selling, and then actually go execute it. So before we let you go, dude, I would love to give you the stage and to share what's going on in your neck of the woods. So I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks. So awesome. Thank you everyone for having me. This has been a ton of fun. The questions were great. This is really similar to how I teach my courses on Maven. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If I didn't get to your question, I want to be able to do that for you. If you have any follow-ups, definitely stay in touch. On Maven, I teach 3 courses. So this was really heavy on describing the ROI design, which is how do we articulate our business value to non-designers. The people who've taken this course are getting pulled into projects by the C-suite, are getting raises and promotions. One head of design I've been working with just got offered the head of product role because they're articulating the value of their work in a totally different way that people don't expect. And so that's been my flagship course. I just launched my 20th cohort of that yesterday. And it's been a ton of fun to train like 400 designers to do this more effectively. A couple other courses I just launched in the last few months are a PM masterclass for designers. So if you want to actually come up with ideas, find business opportunity, create new value for the business, and get ideas on the roadmap, or just have more understanding of how PMs work, have empathy for them, and be a better partner to them. We'll go into identifying new opportunities, running A/B tests, much deeper into metrics and testing, statistics, and data science in that class. And then the newest class I launched is if you are looking for a job, there are 6 competitive edges you can use to get a job, from like targeting the right companies to how you show your work to how you even tweak your work. So that's something I've decided to like kind of bring to people. I've worked at a ton of different companies, and I've been on the hiring committees for places like Airbnb and DoorDash. And so I know how I position myself to get consistent offers, how people need to bring themselves to the table. So I've got a lot of offerings, whether you're like, I love my job, but I need more credibility, or they expect me to step up and I want to like deliver more product value as almost like a PM, or I need to find a job. And how do I do that in a like very business oriented way that's going to resonate with people? Those are the things that I do. So feel free to touch base, ask any questions, and I'd love to be in touch.
Awesome, Ryan. Yeah, so guys, if you're interested and just want to have a look, scan that QR code. I will also drop a link at the end of this in LinkedIn, but you can find Ryan on the event page if you're looking, or if you're watching this from LinkedIn, and if YouTube, I will leave a link in the description. But again, Ryan, thank you so much for your time. I'm gonna do the final wrap ups. I'm gonna take you off stage. If you want to hang around and do a debrief, up to you. I know your time is precious, but feel free to drop off if you have something immediate after this. But thank you again, man.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for having me. It was a ton of fun.
All right, see you in a bit. Okay, guys, again, check out Ryan's courses there, describing the ROI design, PM masterclass for designers, and the design job search strategy and tactics. And go give Ryan a follow on LinkedIn as well. Again, you can find all the links and stuff in the event and on the YouTube channel description. And finally, from me, I want to tell you about the next event we have, the next stream, the next pod. It's actually next week, April the 2nd. It's a little bit earlier than today. And if you want to get notified, all you need to do is just scan this or head to live.uxplaybook.org. And we are speaking to Edward. So Edward is awesome. I'm in a Slack group and with Edward, and he's basically just building stuff with AI all the time and showing us videos, looms and stuff. And we're going to actually walk through something he does with AI and how he integrates that into his design process. So if you're interested in learning about AI from zero and how to integrate it into the modern day design process, I would suggest you tune in. And you don't have to watch live. We are also on YouTube, but you can check it here. You'll get notified. So we do these conversations a couple of times a month, but we are doing 6 in a row every week. So we'd love to have you join that. I think that's it from me. There's nothing else. And again, thank you guys for joining, and I will see you next time. Bye. This is the design of everyday people.
It sound right, boy.